Hello! Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Lincoln Theater and our first in our new series, Talking Music in Maine, Intimate Conversations. And I'm really excited about tonight because we've had this great Talking Art series we've done the last couple of years. And we thought, gosh, there must be a whole group of people out there that would like to look into music. And so I remember about 6 months ago meeting with Aaron Robinson and saying, so Aaron, how'd you like to do this? I'd love to have you do it. It'd be such fun. And he said, yeah, I'd love it. And so tonight's our first time of doing that. And so I'm excited. So thank you for being here. You know, last year here at the theater, we did 57 free events. And this is our continuation of trying to provide different things for different tastes in our community to try to just provide stuff that makes it really interesting. So I'm really glad you're here. And I don't have a lot to say because I'm really excited about tonight. So have a great time. Thank you for being here. And with that, I will introduce Aaron Robinson and our special guest, whom he will introduce. Aaron, it's all yours.
Oh, good evening. Well, thank you, Lincoln Theater, for having me here. And I'd like to say that this has been a dream of mine ever since I was a little boy, and following my lifelong idol, Dick Cavett, who I used to, was that funny? You should see me ride a pony. And I used to watch him interview not the ones who could talk quite a lot, but the ones who never talked at all. And those were the musicians. Because musicians were ones that allowed the music to talk for them. They never got an opportunity to say what they were feeling through words except those that were sung. And music, unlike other forms of art, is really special because the other forms, such as art, sometimes you need to explain it. And even with writing, you have to learn the language to understand it. But music speaks for itself because it's universal. It speaks of emotion. And unfortunately, the person who makes the music never gets to speak too much about it. When you go to a concert, it's mostly music. So you never get to sit down with them. So I really reveled in the fact that Dick would sit down and speak with the great rock and roll legends such as Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix, and speak with them for an hour and really get their thoughts about what it was to not talk about music, but to talk about their life and politics. And he did it so well because he lived by a motto by another great interviewer that is on NPR right now, and she wrote a book that simply was stated, "All I did was ask." So tonight, that's all I'm going to do. We're going to talk with who I believe to be one of the great songwriters of our generation. He has had a career that has spanned 40 years. He started out by singing backup for some of the greats, Rod Stewart and Elton John. He had an opportunity to either go with Elton John or Bob Dylan, and he chose Elton John, and I hope he tells the story. But to speak with someone who's had a career starting out that way and now has every big name in the industry singing backup for him, to do that in 60 minutes, that's about a year a minute. And that's going to be quite difficult. So we're going to be going quite quickly. And what's so unique about my first guest is each one of his albums takes you on a journey. So I hope that we take you on a journey tonight through the life of my very good friend, and I hope you welcome him with a round of applause, Cidny Bullens.
Thank you.
Well,
Put my tuner on the guitar. Hold
there
on
we go.
1 second, just in case I happen to play a song. Okay.
well, first of all, let's get this out of the way because I think this is pretty much where it all started and really what you were known for at the beginning of your career. Congratulations, because this year celebrates 40 years anniversary of the Grease soundtrack.
Oh my gosh.
Now, everyone knows that there are stories, legend and lore, that there are singers that were in the right place at the right time, that come through town like little Jimmy Dickens singing Bird of Paradise, or Helen Redding, who was not supposed to sing Delta Dawn. And they were there that day, and they sang one-take tracks for those, and they became hits. Would you please very quickly tell us how it came to be that you sang 3 songs
lead vocals, yeah.
on the Grease soundtrack, and then it became a Grammy-nominated hit album?
First of all, hello to everybody, and I want to thank Aaron for having me. This is quite an honor. I had done some work and was kind of discovered by a man named Bob Crew, who wrote and produced all the Four Seasons hits and Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels and so on and so forth. And I was singing backup for Bob on all of his, or a lot of his records from 1974 to when I met Elton in 75. But in 1977, Bob called me up one day. I was home, and he said, "You're going to get a call. I suggested you to sing backup for something." And I said, "Great, you know, $90 at the time." I thought that was pretty good, you know. And so I did get a call from a man named Louis St. Louis, who was producing or arranging, I can't really remember, the Grease movie soundtrack. Well, okay. And I showed up at the studio, and he said, we'd like you to sing lead vocal on this song. And I thought, lead vocal? Okay. And of course, I was young at the time. I was a girl at the time. So I had a young girl's voice, and I could kind of manipulate my voice. I had a very pure voice when I was young, and I think I still do. I don't have a lot of vibrato or anything. So, but I had a very pure voice that I could manipulate to sound very young. And so I sang this one song called "Raining on Prom Night." And they said, "Wow, that's great. How about another one?" So I thought, okay, I'm here, you know. So I sang "Freddie, My Love." And then he said, "Now we have a little duet." And I sang the girl's part to the duet of "Mooning," which I could not hum for you now if my life depended on it. But that's how that came to be. And so, and then I have a little adjunct to that. So I got my $90 or whatever it was I think it was a little more to sing lead. And then I got a call one day from someone at Polygram Records, which was the record label that it was going to be on at that point, before the album ever came out, before anything. And this young man said, "Listen, we forgot to have you sign a release." And we've pressed, I mean, this guy got fired 20 times over. We pressed up 20 million CDs, and we forgot to have you sign a release. Would you sign a release? And there was a little voice in my head. Now, I was no legal scholar, but there was a little voice in my head that said, "No." And a day or two later, I got another call and said, "We'll give you $30,000 to sign a release."
Could you explain what a release is?
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
A release meaning that they had my permission to have sung those songs for the base hourly or the session rate for a session is when you go in and play or sing on a record. It's a 3-hour space of time, and you get paid for that session, whatever the price is, the union price is. So I said no, and meanwhile I did not have $30,000, and then I had somebody. Anyway, I ended up making a whole lot of money from the Grease movie soundtrack.
Well, I'm going to share a little secret with you, because at that time I was 8 years old.
I was just going to say.
8 years old. I don't mean to,
Don't you hate him?
Date myself.
Those of you who are over 60.
But while my cousins, who were very butch and hunting and all, they would listen to the soundtrack and jump on the bed and they would do Grease Lightning. But this was my favorite song, and this is the one that I would sing.
I was deprived of a young girl's dream by the cruel force of nature from the blue.
Do you remember those little pink hair curlers that you'd snap?
Instead of a night full
That is me.
That is Sid.
all I got
I can't even get up here now.
funny nose and
Asiatic.
There you are.
There I am, raining
Wonderful.
on prom night.
Well, let's go to, I'm just going to put that up there. We'll get to it in a bit. You grew up in Massachusetts in the 1950s. This
Jeez,
is not,
where did he
no,
get
I
these
know, but
pictures?
this is not 1950.
No.
In the mid, this 1950.
I'm not that old yet.
Who were your musical influences in the 1950s growing up?
I really remember now, I had an older sister who was 8 years older and an older brother who is, my sister passed, but my brother is 5 years older. And they listened to everything from the Everly Brothers to Little Richard to, Elvis Presley, obviously. My sister was into Elvis Presley. So I got a real indoctrination very young, very young, to rock and roll. And it was, for me, it was that grittiness of Little Richard. I wasn't the biggest Elvis fan in the world, although I loved Hound Dog. That was and Don't Be Cruel. But Little Richard, somehow, the grittiness of him, but the harmonies of the Everly Brothers just slayed me. Even as a little kid, I would listen. I can remember being homesick, and you remember the 45s with the thing, and they drop on the. I would be homesick, and I didn't know the difference between an A side and a B side. There were two songs on each record, so I thought, great, and I would flip them over, and listen to records all day. To have the little record player by my bed, Sylvania or something like. I don't even remember. And so I think those were my biggest influence. There were others too, but in the 50s it had to be the Everly Brothers and
Little Richard. That's
yeah.
great to hear. Let's skip ahead to 1974. Is this the first band that you were a part of?
This is the first real band other than high school I was a part of. It's called Kemosabe.
Kemosabe.
Kemosabe. What a great name. Nobody ever took it. But anyway, this is Trantham Whitley, who's probably the least known of all of them other than me. He's a fantastic keyboard player, and his finger spread was like a foot. And that's Jim Fielder, who was the bass player for Blood, Sweat, and Tears, the original bass player for Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Trevor Veach, who was a really dear friend of mine, I haven't seen him in years, he wrote and produced, I've just gone blank. Great guitar player, but he had some hits in the 70s as a writer and a producer, but also toured with Tom Rush for many years as Tom Rush's guitar player. That's me. Thomas Jefferson Kay was a notorious record producer. He's now gone. And Rick Slosser, the guy on the end, played on Van Morrison's Moondance album, and he played on Boz Scaggs's album, and he's still playing today. He lives in Mexico now, but he's a great drummer.
Great. All right, I'm going to read this off simply because your career is just so incredibly extensive that I could not commit everything to memory, and I don't want to forget anything. But in 1974, Sid performed backup vocals on Gene Clark's album.
Yes, no other.
And as one of the Sexolettes.
Oh my God.
On the debut album by Discotheques and the Sexolettes.
Yes.
But you also served as backup vocalist on Rod Stewart's Atlanta Crossing.
Right.
As also, of course, which is probably the next most known of you,
Yeah.
with Elton John on 3 major tours.
That's 75.
But in 75, I apologize. As well as his album Blue Moves and his hit with Kiki D, Don't Go Breaking My Heart.
So next time you're in the grocery store
Yes.
and you hear, ooh, nobody knows it, nobody knows it, that's me. And every time I'm in the grocery store, I say to the cashier, that's me. And they're like, they used to say, all right, lady, get along, get along. Now it's like, really? I mean, so.
Now, I'm going to show just a small clip of you with Elton. It's
I was his girlfriend back then, kind of, for the press.
the biggest YouTube clip there is out there, and you are just jamming away. And when anybody puts
Embarrassing.
when anybody puts this clip up on YouTube, and there are many clips of this at the London, it's in London, it's at
Not Wembley.
no.
Odeon? No.
Something like that.
I just went blank.
When anybody,
What is
no,
it?
it's not the Palladium. No, not the Palladium. But when anybody puts this clip up there, there are 2 names that are always in the description: Elton John and
me?
and you.
Really?
Always in the description, because, and you'll see why.
Oh, God, this is embarrassing.
No, it's not.
I'm in the Stripes.
Sid is in the Stripes.
Ray Cooper, love him. Caleb Quay, Roger Pope, Davy Johnstone, who I just saw the other couple months ago.
Right there.
Oh yeah, the butt. Nice butt. John Joyce is still a good friend. All right, you can turn it off now.
Oh, I don't know. I think we should see the rest.
Oh, God.
But it's amazing, though, that a song like this still lives on and is so repetitive. I just had a professor who was into conducting, and he said that it's so simplistic, it's so repetitive, and I absolutely love it.
And the crowd goes wild. I've seen Elton twice in the last year or so. The best thing that came out of my relationship with Elton is that we're still really good friends. And I just saw him a couple times, and he still does the song, Nice Hair.
You went to his wedding, didn't you?
I did go to his wedding, and he's a very generous, wonderful man. And but yeah, he's awesome. I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, in 1979, you married Bob Crew's brother.
I did.
Dan.
Yes.
And this, I believe, is a picture from around that time.
You know, can I just say one thing? Oh no, never mind.
But this, I believe,
That's around that time, 1975, 76.
This is as close as you're going to get to Christy McNichol as you could possibly be. This is such a beautiful picture. It is just heavenly.
That's a Norman Seeff picture.
The Norman Seeff picture, the famous Norman Seeff picture. It is just beautiful. But each time I chose a picture, I marveled at how completely different you kept transforming yourself.
Yeah.
It just was amazing, but also your music. We're not focusing a lot on Sid's music, except on a couple songs from each of the decades, simply because I'm going to tell you that you need to go home and buy Sid's albums from each of those generations, 70s, 80s, 90s, the 10s, zeros and the 10s. Because
I have some of them here, but not the old ones.
Right, because they change also with that. How did you meet Dan?
I met Dan Crew through Bob Crew.
Mm-hmm.
He came out I was living with Bob Crew kind of as his gopher protege. And as I said, Bob was the producer, wrote Can't Take My Eyes Off You, produced all that stuff, all the Four Seasons, Ragdoll and all that. And Bob discovered me. I was working in a gas station, and there's a whole story. You know, if I ever bring my show, my one-person show back to Maine, come see it because it's pretty interesting. More detail of all this stuff, lots of multimedia. But and I met Dan in June of 1974, and he didn't like me right away because he wondered what the hell I was, you know, what role I was playing with his brother. And meanwhile, I was just this innocent, you know, running around for him. But within a few days, we got to know each other, and we ended up anyway. 5 years later, we had kind of an off and on relationship, and then we became good friends. In about 1976. We just became good platonic friends, and in 1978, he asked me to marry him, and I went, "What?" And I said no about 4 times, and then I finally said yes, and we got married in October of 1979.
Right.
Married for 22 years.
And in 1979, that is when you released Desire Wire.
Correct. Right at the very end of 78. I always say 79, but it was the end of 78.
Albums can get tricky
Yeah.
because you're either recording or releasing,
Right.
and sometimes the years get mixed up. And on that album, your first big hit, which was
Survivor.
Survivor. And we were talking about Survivor up in the dressing room. Survivor was your first Grammy-nominated,
As Cidny Bullens.
Grammy-nominated song.
My first single was Grammy nominated.
Right.
Yeah.
If you get a chance to hear this song, and I've been listening to so many Cidny Bullens songs, if I'm allowed.
Yes, you are.
Yes.
I was. That's who it is.
Survivor is just fantastic. This song stands up against every song that was written at that time. It was the voice and sound of that generation.
Yeah.
It just is brilliant. I mean, you cannot get any better sound of the late 70s than this song, Survivor. And just looking at this, there it is.
That's the quintessential
That
Cidny Bullens
is the
shot.
cover of Desire Wire.
Right.
And it just speaks of being a survivor of and
Little did I know.
yeah, well, and the wonderful words that you use as well, a dancer and all of those quintessential words from that. So in February, you came out with it rose to the Billboard Hot 100 Pop Singles, February 1979. Music critic William Ruhlman called it one of the great lost rock albums of the 1970s. And may I ask you, do you consider yourself a survivor?
Yeah. Hello. Yes, I did even then for different reasons. Obviously now, how many years later? 40 years later, having been through my life, and we'll go into some of that, and everyone does go through losses. I've been through my own. Yeah, I am a survivor. I just, and my whole family is like that. I guess it was just in the genes somewhere, you know, just this kind of New England, pull up your bootstraps, you know. Some of, you know, there's always the shadow and the light to that attitude of the New Englander, you know, kind of toughness, but, you know, hard scrabble life. But I'm grateful that my parents instilled in me a spirit of not quitting.
Well, it's quite prophetic that the very first song that you were recognized for is Survivor, because many of your titles are biographical in nature, in that
Most.
if you were to look at your life and simply write it out in titles, you have many that are quite surviving: Boxing with God, Gravity and Grace, Hammer and Nails, Send Me an Angel. they're quite, you know, alone and facing the world at times. At times, and what's wonderful about your albums that I have found is that wherever you are in life, there's always a Cidny Bullens song that can mirror what you're going through, and you can find it at some point in your albums.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Now, in the 80s, you came off with Breaking the Chain, and from Survivor, which we talked about, you were singing very differently. You were singing very high, and we were talking about that because you were almost guided to sing that high.
Right. When I Survivor, my first album, Desire Wire, which I love the songs on, but I can't listen to it very easily anymore because I'm singing so high. And even some of the live tapes that I still have from that era, I'm pushing my voice. But don't forget, Bob Crew, Frankie Valli, he believed that, now I wasn't singing falsetto like Frankie Valli, but Bob Crew believed as a producer that that high voice created energy. He was a pop master. He wasn't a folk person or a opera person or anything like that. He was a pop music master, Bob Crew was. And obviously he's you know, sold millions and millions of albums, so he's now gone. God rest his soul. But he believed that this high-pitched voice was creating energy. So even though he did not produce my first album, I took from him because I recorded it soon after I was working with him. That belief that that's what I should do. It wasn't until the 80s, and there's a 10-year spread between 1989 and 79 album, and I did have one come out in 80, which didn't do much. And in 1989, when my next album came out, which Aaron is talking about, which was the eponymous Cidny Bullens. You have to learn that term in music business. Just means you named your album after your own self. But I had 2 children by that time, so I had quit the music business. I had my daughter Reed in 82 and my daughter Jessie in 85. Anyway, but I went back to the music, and I recorded an album, and I did start going back to my lower, more natural voice.
Right. Yeah. And what struck me about Breaking the Chain, not only about that, you were a full octave below. When I heard that, I said, what happened between 1978 and the 80s? Not only was the voice changing, but the lyrics were as well. Mm-hmm. You went from a survivor facing the world. Mm-hmm. The titles for your album, for Breaking the Chain, you have Let Me Love Somebody, Where Did I Hide My Heart, mm-hmm. Cry for Love, mm-hmm. Don't Let This Love Go Down.
Jeez, I never thought of it
Fight
that way.
For Me. And your lyrics go from Don't Let Me Leave Here Tonight, Don't Let Me Go Home Alone, I've been my own prisoner, yeah. I've been my own jailer, I've tried to set myself free. That's quite a change from...
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Superman,
yeah,
Supergirl.
You know, life gets complicated, and I had my 2 children, quit the music business for...
Well, let's get to that, because that's my next card.
Okay.
So in 1980, you hit the Billboard Hot 100 again with your song "Trust Me." Mm-hmm. But then you did withdraw from the music business
right.
In the early 80s to raise a family. You had 2 daughters with Dan, Reed,
yep.
1982, and Jessie, 1985.
Yep, that's on North Haven.
Reed?
Yep.
Jessie?
Yep. I love that picture.
And you
it's
withdrew?
beside my bed.
You withdrew how long?
Almost 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah, 9 years,
Right.
probably.
Right. Yep. And then you came out with Breaking the Chain.
Yeah,
Yep.
with Cidny Bullens, that album. Yeah.
Cidny. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And after that, it wasn't very long. It was not very long before Sid hit again and struck. It doesn't take long for the world to notice you once again. Because with that album, you landed yourself on Late Night with Conan O'Brien.
Yeah.
You landed yourself on The Today Show. You landed yourself on
Not that album.
No, but you've
Oh,
landed
okay.
yourself on those places.
Yes.
And also, I came across this wonderful little video of you on American Bandstand
Oh,
with
my
Dick
God.
Clark. Now,
That was 1981.
yeah, and I'm gonna right before this all happened. Now, I want you to watch this interview because, no, not because of you, but simply because, and I'm going to refer to you as
Cindy.
as Cindy,
Yeah.
because not only was it very difficult for a woman to break into the rock and roll scene and to be taken seriously, but I've watched this clip probably 24 times, because first of all, the initial reaction was, there's Cindy on American Bandstand. Wow, isn't that great? But then when I started to listen to how Dick Clark was talking to you, it was incredibly belittling. It was incredibly misogynistic. All of the men in the band were getting more credit than Cindy was, and you wrote all the songs on the album.
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah, he didn't even...
Wrote all my songs on all the albums.
He didn't even know how to talk to you, let alone give you the credit. So I want you to watch this clip.
Let me just make an adjunct here, too. On this clip, you will see me. This just has to do with who I am now as Cidny. I was trying so hard to be a girl.
Oh.
So...
We're going hopping today, where things are popping. Up to the
right, who
Delphi
remembers
way,
this?
we're gonna drop it on all the music they play on the bandstand. Bandstand.
Hello. Gentlemen, without them, you'd be in a lot of trouble. Shall we take care of that right now?
For sure.
Let's.
yeah.
I say we'll start with the man furthest
I'd
over.
be in a lot of
in the
trouble. I
red
never
shirt.
noticed that.
Trantham Whitley on keyboards.
Nice to see you, sir. The gentleman here,
Howard Epstein,
Howard. Gentleman behind drums.
Tom Mooney,
Thank you, Tom. And last but not least,
Mark Doyle.
Mark. Nice to have you with us. What kind of jobs did you have before you became a singer?
Mostly gas station work, pumping gas, and I swept floors. I was a short order cook. I licked envelopes. You name it, I did it.
Why did he ask you
Didn't
that?
somewhere along the way it occur to you that you were wrong in thinking you might become a singer?
No, not really. I just had this kind of blind drive that I had something to give to rock and roll. And really, it's rock and roll. More than singing, it's the writing and the performing and all the
I
stuff.
beg your pardon to interrupt. Did you write everything on that album?
Yes, and I co-wrote the next song that we're going to do with Mark Doyle. But
That brings up a subject. If I were able to write, I would be inclined to put all of my own stuff on the album. Do you do that? I'm sorry. Is this your second album?
yes.
He doesn't even know who
Did you
you
do it in
are.
the first one too?
Yeah, I wrote all the songs, co-wrote too.
Are you ever going to run us stuff?
I hope not. That's, it might happen. I hope it doesn't. If it does, though, that's all right. I'm not opposed to doing other people's material.
I want to jump back for a second. During that period of pumping gas and licking envelopes and all those dumb things you did, was there anybody along the way who said, hey, you're good, you ought to do other things, or did anybody give you a little helping hand?
Well, when I finally moved to California from the East Coast, Bob Crew, I met Bob Crew, and he was my catalyst. I had a knapsack and a guitar, and he met me.
For the uninitiated, this man is an artist, a producer, a writer, a performer. He's guided and helped an awful
course,
lot of other people.
you're not
He
that
also happens to be a friend of mine.
Yeah.
I don't know where to go from there. Do you offer any hope for anybody who ever reaches the despair and says, oh, I got to give this up?
Sure, you just got to keep going. If you want to do it. I figured my odds were that someday I was going to make it if I didn't give up. So.
What was the Elton John story? Did you con him into a job? sweet young thing like you buffalo this man?
Not exactly. I did crash a party where he was at, and I decided that I would stay after I saw that he was there. And I met his manager and him throughout the night. And he just asked me, after he found out that I was a singer, he asked me if I would go on the road with him. And 2 days later, I was rehearsing, and the next week I was on the road.
Sounds like a bad B movie of the old days. Would you sing
Oh,
another
really?
song?
I sure would.
This is
I
the
never
one you
thought
two
about
co-wrote?
this.
Again, the title, please.
Too close to home.
Ladies and gentlemen, Cidny Bullens, please.
Can you believe it?
Why do you bring these things up?
Well, no, because you are a survivor. I brought these things up because honestly, it is amazing, you know, that you have gone through this. Yeah, you really
Yeah.
are a fighter. You really are a survivor.
Well, not only that, let me just say a little thing about those days in the music business. As a woman, I grew up I had 3 sisters and a brother, but I never grew up thinking that I was a girl and I couldn't do something. I just never did. I felt like I could do anything. And it never occurred to me that I would be discriminated against because I was a woman in the music business. I knew I was talented. I knew I was a good musician, performer, songwriter, etc. But when I went to record companies to try to sell my music, they would say, well, we already have a woman on our label, or something of that nature. We have 2 women now, we don't really want another one, you know. And I would say to them, how many men do you have on your label? You know, if you have Paul Simon and Paul McCartney or somebody on your label, you're not going to take another man? But this is it never occurred to me until Bob Ezrin, who was the producer of Alice Cooper and a whole bunch of other people, happened to wander in a studio where I was doing a demo, Cherokee Studios, which is where I kind of got my start. That's how I ended up on Gene Clark's album and all that stuff. I used to hang out there. And I was doing a demo. When I came back into the control room, he said to me, you know, you're going to have twice as hard a time making it in the music business. And I looked at him and I said, why? He said, because you're a woman. And it wasn't until that moment that it occurred to me that all of the stuff that I was trying to do, swimming upstream, because I wasn't like Joni Mitchell, I wasn't like, you know, Linda Ronstadt, I wasn't like even Bonnie Raitt, who was a guitar player at that time, but she was the blues, she wasn't pop. And she happens to be a really good friend of mine. But you know, I was swimming upstream and didn't even know it until Bob Ezrin pointed that out. And then I started to notice. And, you know, I was writing my own songs. I was performing my own songs. I was a kind of a male type performer, meaning that I used to jump off the pianos and put the guitars between my legs and get down on my knees and, you know, play with my teeth and stuff like that, which is why, you know, anyway. And no other women were doing that, and it was off-putting for some people. And, but anyway, I just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, yeah. And in 1994, you released Why Not?
My demos. I just decided to put something out.
And on that, you
Yeah.
have an incredible song, which, if anybody knows me, one of my favorite songwriters next to Sid is Randy Newman. And he has the ability to just sit down at the piano and write a ballad in the style of Louisiana, or I Think It's Gonna Rain Today, and just destroy you. And there's a song on this album called Send Me an Angel. Please download it and listen to it.
Well, it's on my Neverland album.
Oh, Neverland album.
A much better version. It was on Why Not
Okay, yeah.
first.
Right.
And then because Why Not was just an EP of my demos that I did between 1990 and 1994, just trying to keep myself. It was just a self, you know, I'd throw it out of the backseat of my car if you wanted it, you know. But when I did my Neverland album in 2001, I put that back on, and Emmylou Harris sings
with
the
you.
backup on
But
that.
the chords are so tender, so touching.
Is that your favorite song?
No. You just wait. You
Okay.
just wait.
He won't tell me.
I won't tell her. Okay, now, this is where the journey takes a little bit of a turn. Born in 1985, at the age of 11, Jesse dies of Hodgkin's disease, complications.
Correct. Yep. That was on North Haven, where I have a little home, and where Erin and I met many years ago. She died 3 months after her diagnosis of Hodgkin's disease, 4th-stage Hodgkin's disease, and then died of an infection during treatment on March 23rd, 1995. And let me just say that she is the prow of my ship. That she has, for 22 years now, guided me in this life. And I really am not, my wife is woo-woo, but I'm not as woo-woo as she is. But she has come to me, Jesse, in various ways. And when she thinks my life should take a turn, she lets me know. And but that is how I know that I'm a survivor today, that I'm sitting in front of you to go through the death of a child, as some of you may know. I hope not. I don't think there's anything worse, although I can't put myself in anybody's shoes. But for me,
and from that tragedy, there came probably one of the most critically acclaimed album of your career, which is called Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth. And composers that just write music have a gift that have been given to them, that they can express what's inside of them through music. And a poet has also been given that gift. But a songwriter has truly been given a unique gift because they can express both words and music at the same time. So you were able to pour forth what was happening inside of you through song, both words and music. This album is truly, truly remarkable in that Sid once again takes you on a journey. The title track, which is
Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth.
and ends with
Better than I've ever
better
been.
than I've ever. It's amazing. Please download the entire album. It really is unbelievable. What was the process for you? Do you even remember that?
Oh,
time?
yeah, I remember it really well.
Yeah.
I wrote 10 songs in the first year and 10 months after Jesse's death. For no one. Not for you, not for my husband, not for my daughter, not for anybody, for me. And the first one came, well, let me just go back and say that all 10 of these songs are moments of my grief from Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth, which was the first song that I wrote about 3.5 months after her death. And I hadn't picked up my guitar. I was just wandering aimlessly. Dan and I were separated at the time. We did come back together after her death for 4 years, but we were separated. I was in Portland, and I was wandering kind of aimlessly through my apartment room to room, which I did a lot. I wandered aimlessly a lot. And saw my guitar, picked it up, and this song emerged, Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth. And I was at once, I was horrified that I had just written a song about the death of my own child. because I am a songwriter and I do it for a living, and yet it was this song that had nothing to do with any of that. It had to do with me trying to reconnect with my daughter. And that was that. And I kept it to myself. I think I played it for one of my dear friends in Nashville who I adore and who I trust. And she said, "That's the best song you've ever written." And 3 months later, I wrote another song, "In Better Hands," it's called. 3 months after that, I wrote another song, "1,000 Shades of Gray," which I picture, because she was cremated, but her stone is up on North Haven Island. And I picture that it's by the water, and it's Southern Harbor up there, and I picture the March, April grayness, and my heart obviously was feeling, or my life was feeling like I was living in 1,000 shades of gray. And I wrote those 3 songs, and I thought, well, okay. And at that point, about 6 or 9 months after her death, I had a little bit of energy, and I decided to go to Nashville because I knew all the musicians there, and I had great friends there, and I'd been writing there as a songwriter, kind of reinvented myself when my kids were little as a songwriter, so I wouldn't have to go on the road. And although I went down there every so often to write. And I gathered up my musician friends, and we went into the studio and we recorded those 3 songs. And I thought that was it, until I went to Paris with my friend just because I needed to go somewhere in November of 1997. And I came home, and I was up on North Haven in my little house, and I wrote a song called "The Lights of Paris." And it was about, obviously, everything was about Jessie. Every fiber of my being was in this grief of losing this little girl, this love of my life. I mean, I had 2 daughters, and I loved them both equally. But you lose one, your heart is crushed, you know. And I wrote this song, Lights of Paris, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to continue to write songs. And I talked to, anybody here know Beth Nielsen Chapman? Wonderful, wonderful singer-songwriter, lives in Nashville, has had a bunch of hits. Beautiful woman, had lost her husband to cancer before Jessie died. And she called me one day up in North Haven. And she said, you're going to write about this. And I thought, there's no frigging way. There's no way. Actually, she called me before I wrote any songs. That's what it was. I was up in North Haven. And so I thought, oh, I am going to write. And then I wrote some more songs. And so the process was over a period of a year and a half, year and 10 months. But I didn't know it was going to be an album until I wrote about 7 songs. And then I went to Rodney Crowell, who's this wonderful singer-songwriter producer in Nashville. If you don't know who Rodney Crowell is, if you don't know who Beth Nielsen Chapman are, you should find out. They're incredible. And I went to Rodney. He was a friend of mine, and I trusted him. There was something about Rodney. He's a very gentle soul. He was married to Roseanne Cash for a long time. They're no longer married for a long time. But he's a very gentle soul, and I went to him, and I played him the songs, and I said, what do I do? He said, you have to make this album. You have to make this album. He said, and I only had 7 songs, so an album is not 7 songs. You need at least 10. He said, but you can't not write 3 more songs about Jessie. He said, you can't use filler. You can't use any old songs. You have to make this whole album about Jessie. And I thought, oh God, that's not going to happen. I can't write 3 more songs. Because you see, these songs that I wrote about Jessie, and then I'll stop. These songs that I wrote about my daughter, and about my grief, and about how I was going to get through this, came from a place in me that they couldn't have come before, and they can't come now. They could only come in that period of time when I was in this abject grief about losing my child that I bore. And I got a visit from Jessie. And because I was going to say, I said, screw it, I can't do this. And I got a visit from her. And I won't tell you about it because we don't have the time, but after my visit from her, I wrote 2 songs that day, and the next day I wrote the last one.
And one of those songs we're actually going to listen to. I said that we weren't going to listen to a lot of Sid's music tonight, but one is extremely special. Out of all of the 40 years, probably the most special of all is one that's found on that album. And it's a duet between you and your daughter Reed.
Oh.
Yes. It's called As Long As You Love, Scarlet Wings. We're going to bring the house lights down. We're going to listen to it together. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right.
It's make me cry.
Oh.
It was the hardest song.
Time has a different meaning now, since you found your scarlet wings. Forever seems like yesterday, but only angels know these things. I can hear your voice sometimes at night, and it echoes through the day. When my soul cries out for missing you, I remember what you say. As long as you love, you will see me in the stars. As you look up at the stars, I will be there. As long as you love, I will whisper in your ear, little whispers you will hear. As long as you love, as long as you love. You are standing here beside me now, as I watch the children play. To those of us you left behind, you are never far away. Even heaven cannot hold your heart, for no boundaries love allows. So little angel, spread those scarlet wings as you whisper to me now. As long as you love, you will feel me in the sun, in the warming of the sun. I will be long as you love, you will understand the rain. You must bless the falling rain. As long as you love.
As long as you love, you will see me in the stars. As you look up at the stars, I will be there. As long as you love, I will whisper in your ear. Little whispers you will hear. As long as you love.
As long as you love.
It's a perfect song.
Is that your favorite song?
Nope. It's close. That's a perfect song, ladies and gentlemen. Perfect song.
Haven't heard that in a long time.
Sid and I first met 2001, North Haven. I got a call one day from a Broadway producer named John Wolpe. John. And when I first met you, Sid, I was very intimidated.
And you should have been.
I was actually scared of you. I had been asked to orchestrate, arrange, and conduct the music for a musical called Islands. And so I had been working all that time to do that. And the day that Sid arrived, it was quite a big...
I was on the road.
Hullab-
So I
it was
wasn't there for
quite a big, hullabaloo that she was arriving. So I was quite nervous, and I was seated at the plastics, as they call it, the Clavinova, and Sid sat right next to me, like Johnny Bench, like that. And everything was going fine until we reached one song. It was called "Somewhere I'd Never Been," and I had changed one of the chords. And you said, "That's not my music." Do you remember that? That's not my music. It was a wonderful lesson for me. Simply because it wasn't ego on my part, and it wasn't ego on your part. There was no ego there. There was no clashing of egos. It was simply that we came from two different worlds. At that time, I came from Broadway, and you had come from rock, but you were trying to write for Broadway, and you were doing a brilliant, brilliant job. And I can remember the chords wonderfully. You had gone from G to C, and I went from G to E minor through a B7th, which I thought was more powerful at that time. I was wrong. But Sid also showed me a wonderful thing in the last finale, which was to go from E flat through G, not to C minor, but from E flat to G to A flat, which was marvelous.
I have no idea what he's talking about.
So it was a wonderful learning experience. But the thing that struck me wonderfully, we didn't talk. We did not talk at all. It's not that we didn't get along. It's just we had two things that we needed to do for that show. And one evening, John Wolpe, Sid, and I had dinner together, and the topic of religion came up. And John is very, very anti-religion. And he was very vocal about his disbelief in a higher power. And it was the first time you became quite animated. Very.
I don't remember this at all.
Very
so
animated.
I'm curious to see what happened.
Yeah. And I just sat there eating the only thing John knew how to make. And he made it every night.
Oh, yeah, now, it
Right.
was at his house, right?
Right, at his house.
Yeah.
Yep. And the two of you really got at it because he was trying to get something over and you weren't having it. And you let a wall down that I had never seen at that time. I didn't know you very long, but you let a wall down. And you actually broke down.
Did I?
In tears. Because you were not having it, that someone was going to tell you that if you wanted to believe in some higher power that got you through a period in your life, that you were going to sit there and take it. What is your faith today?
Interesting. I don't remember, I vaguely remember that now, as you say. I lost my trust. Now, I've been in AA for 41 years, all right? I know it's Alcoholics Anonymous, but let's get real. And I had a very, very short drinking and drug career, but it was intense, being on the road with Elton and, you know, all the craziness that went around rock and roll in those days. I found out that I can't tolerate that stuff, so I stopped. And I was blessed to have people around me who suggested that I stop, and I did. And so I had developed some higher power, and I think in my life I had some smorgasbord of not religious at all, but spirituality. And I do believe in energy, that we're all connected with energy. But after Jesse died, I lost my trust in anything. I didn't lose my belief that there was something because I had this connection with my deceased daughter and with, you know, so there was something there, but I lost my trust. I mean, how can you trust a God that's going to take away kids? And that was my feeling at the time. And it took me over 10 years to come back to some kind of faith and trust, and I'm still working on it. So I am not a religious person, but I do believe that we are all connected as human beings by something other than the fact that we're human beings. That there is this energy that flows, and I don't know. I mean, the older I get, the less I know, the less facts I think I know. But the more feeling, the older I get, the more the feelings of what I believe, which I can't describe, become stronger. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of stories I could tell, including how I met my wife. I get to be a husband and a wife in the same lifetime.
Just to break the levity, this was the same year that I met Sid. So this was you scared me. So
What did I do?
No. I mean that was the look for
me?
that was
me?
the look for Neverland.
That was the look for Neverland.
And
yes.
what's amazing about Neverland is Neverland, when you think of Neverland, it's Peter Pan and flying and all of this. But your lyrics for Neverland, I love this because so many people want to fly away to Neverland. They're still writing about Neverland today. But for 2001, you write, "Don't go back to Neverland where wishes don't come true and nothing ever happens there the way you want it to. It's so hard to understand why things don't work out right. If you go back to Neverland, you'll kiss your dreams goodbye." Yeah, whew, baby. Okay, so this is us.
Oh,
I know.
Aren't we cute?
That's when you were a woman and I was a man. Right? Yeah. So there's John.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this,
That's the Refugees.
the Refugees, I guess we missed a bit. Yep, so
Yeah.
I'll get to that. I think we won't have time. But quickly talk about, because that was then and this is now?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was just taken a couple months ago. The Refugees are Wendy Waldman, who is a wonderful songwriter, wrote Save the Best for Last for Vanessa Williams, and is a great singer-songwriter on her own. Linda Ronstadt, you name it. You look her up, Wendy Waldman. Deborah Holland was the lead singer in a late 80s, early 90s group with Stewart Copeland of The Police and the great bass player Stanley Clarke. Animal Logic, she was the songwriter and lead singer. And that's me now with my mustache trying. It's taken me 6 years to get what I have. And we play.
Me too.
My brother can't even grow anything, so that's the genetics. But and we're still together after 10 years. We're only recording now because Wendy lives in Los Angeles, Deborah lives in Vancouver, and I live in Maine, although I'm about to move to Santa Fe. So it's hard to tour. But great harmonies. Look up the Refugees. We have 2 albums out. We're going to have a 3rd album out pretty soon. Great harmonies if you like harmonies. And they saved they're the ones that started getting me back on the road to laughter.
We all need it.
Yeah.
We're in our 3rd act. I know we're going to go over a little bit. I apologize. We'll cut
Anybody
in.
upset?
We'll cut into the Q&A. But I'd like to change the conversation to a little bit more personal and not so much music. Mm-hmm. In 2012, you came out as transgender. Mm-hmm. You schooled me a little bit this evening because I am, and I love to use the word ignorant, and ignorant is just a word that means yet to learn. Okay? Mm-hmm. And I am ignorant of things every day, and I love to learn. So to know that. In full disclosure, I have a gay sister whose partner is transitioning. They have a daughter who they are raising to be gender neutral.
Wow.
So I'm learning as well. And it's a very, very delicate line.
Yeah.
Especially around Christmas and birthdays, to send the right present. It's very difficult to find the right words. Mm-hmm. I have said she in the last 2 months in preparation for this talk, simply because I've known you for 20 years. And you yourself said up to 2011,
but I came out in 12.
Right, but even when we look back on albums, it's
yes, I'm Cindy. I was.
What is it like in today's climate to be transgender?
Well,
especially in this political climate.
Yeah, I won't tell you the whole story, but it happened very quickly, meaning that if you had told me the day before I had the suggestion that someone came out to me as transgender who I knew very well, if you had told me a day before that I was going to transition late in my life, I would have said you were crazy. Now, I've known since I was 4 years old that I should have been a boy. I've never denied it. I didn't really talk about it all that much. People thought I was gay because I wore what I wore. People thought this, that, lesbian, whatever. I was married, and loved my husband, had 2 children. Thank God the universe gave me the experience of bearing 2 children and breastfeeding and all that stuff. I loved it, but I knew even then, as I was breastfeeding, that I internally was a man. You just know. It's like you're a man and you're a woman, and that's what you grow up thinking. Well, I knew I had the wrong body, and it was very disconcerting. Today, and I transitioned before the big wave of people started coming out, and before the big wave of where transgender started becoming a term that everybody knew what it meant. Even just 6 years ago, Chaz Bono had done it at that time, and there were a few other people, but I was right at the forefront before it started becoming a national topic, before the Time magazine had somebody on a cover and all that. There's two different sides to it, because there's the political, three for me: the political, the personal, and the business side. In other words, I was a known person. I'm not a household name, but I have fans, and I had a career and all that stuff, so I had my business, my profession to deal with. And personally, it was very difficult for me to do, because I had been a she for almost 60 years. Politically, it's worse now than it was 6 years ago. And one of the reasons I wanted to write my one-person show, which is called Somewhere Between, which is interesting because Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth, and then 20 years later, I have a show called Somewhere Between Not an Ordinary Life. And through my story, I don't preach, I don't educate, that's not my thing. I mean, if I'm talking at a college, I might say something, educational, but my show is about my life. And in the talking about my life, and this flashbacks to when I was a kid and I tell you about my gender issues and moments of that, and then the last third of the show is about my transition. So politically, one of the reasons I wanted to write it was because I wanted people to experience being a transgender person as being a part of being a human being. I'm a human being. I've had a whole life. I was married. I bore 2 babies. I breastfed them. I raised them. Well, Jessie until she was 11. I have grandchildren. I have 3 coming up on 4, due in August, from Reed, who decided to have a clan, which is all good. I have a life. I'm a human being. I'm not a freak of nature. I probably am a freak of nature, but whatever happened, whatever the genetic thing or the thing that happened, just like somebody maybe is born blind, or somebody's born with a blonde hair or red hair or whatever. I just happen to get a male brain and a female body. And it's opposite for trans women who are born male physiologically and have a female brain, because it's the brain that tells us what the gender is. The body tells us who we are physically, but the brain tells us who we are, what gender we are. And I knew that I was a boy and have known my whole life. I tried to be a girl every once in a while. I even wore a dress a few times. But,
me too. Listen, I think you're a
Really?
force. I think you're a force of nature. That's what I would call you, a force of nature, because you're just. I love you. You're over the top. Do you think it's harder for a woman to trans to a man than a man to a woman in this day and age? Because it's everywhere. You see RuPaul's Drag Race. It's almost as though it's accepted.
No, I think it's harder.
Is it?
For a man to change to a woman than a woman to change to a man.
Really? Okay.
Nobody questions me. Nobody. I go into a men's room, which was scary as hell
right.
the first time I ever did that. Oh my God, I didn't even wash my hands. I went, I was like, don't look at me. Now it's like, I've been in Fenway Park, for God's sake, men's restroom. I've been in Gillette Stadium men's room. They're like, get out of my, how are you doing? Whatever. But if I walked into a woman's room right now, what would you think? But men who change into women, unless they do it very young, before they go into their puberty. It's much more difficult. All the bathroom rules, all the laws and everything, not to get too political, but all of those are old white men who don't know what a transgender person is, but they fear seeing, identifying, thinking they'll see a man who's in a dress or makeup or whatever in the men's room. They don't care if I'm in the men's room because they can't tell. I go in the stall, they can't tell. But they can tell a lot, not always, but a lot more. And it's much, much harder. If you do any, I wish I could remember the name of the documentary that CNN put out about the Navy SEAL who was a decorated, I believe he was a Navy SEAL, or he might have been the Marine Special Forces or whatever, who transitioned into a woman. And I think his name is Chris somebody. Even for me, it was eye-opening. I get off easy because nobody questions me. I'm married. I'm married to a beautiful woman that's my wife.
You got married in New York City.
I got married.
Just
We eloped.
this year. Just
we
this
eloped
year.
in January to New York City.
How did you meet Tanya?
She's the director of my show. How does that happen?
How long have you been together?
We've been together about 2.5 years. We met 4 years ago. She came to me. I said, "What?" Like I did with Dan. No way. I was supposed to be alone for the rest of my life. But she was too good. She is too good, and I love her. And
You've called home North Haven, Portland, Los Angeles,
Yep.
New York City,
Yes.
Nashville for a little bit. You've worked there. And now we are so lucky because Tanya is closing on a house this week. Tomorrow. And you are flying out, and you are going to be...
I'm driving.
To Santa Fe.
I've driven many times.
To Santa Fe.
Santa Fe, New Mexico.
So this might be the last time you perform in Maine.
Well, I'm going to do a house concert in Damariscotta.
Woohoo!
On
Right.
August 24th. It's because I'm going to be here because my daughter's expecting. And who's the grandparent that stays with the other 3 kids? Who takes care of everybody? Me. My daughter doesn't care if I'm around except I'm the babysitter. She's like, "Mom, really? You have to go to Santa Fe?" I said, "I'll be back." Anyway, I'm flying in. And yes, I still have my place on North Haven, and I will be back. But this might be my last appearance as a Mainer. I haven't decided yet whether to wait until the election or not.
Well,
where I'm going to vote.
So 2 things before we say goodnight. Sid will, we're going to have a little Q&A after, and then after that, Sid will be selling her CDs and... Oh, did I just do it?
You did it, but that's okay. But now it's now and not then.
I can't believe
You
it.
know what?
I made it all
I don't
through
really
this.
care.
I've made it all through this
If we were at a
evening.
restaurant, the waitress would look at him and go, "Really?
Really? 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 I know. Okay, I apologize. Sid will be selling CDs and giving away.
I'm going to give away one. If you buy one, I'll give you one.
Right, and it's a fabulous one. It's
Dream 29.
Dream 29. Yes. Okay. These blue cards are in a la James Lipton, Actors Studio.
You've done very well, by the way.
Okay. Thank you.
hand.
Yes. So I'd like to do a little questionnaire, which is what he
Should I
does.
play a song first?
I'm going to do that after.
Okay.
Yep, because I haven't told you my favorite song.
Well, how do you know I'm going to do that?
I won't, but I at least will tell you. So I'm going to do 10 questions, and we didn't do that. We didn't. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally? And these are just rapid fire. They don't need to be long.
Rapid fire?
Yeah. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Creativity. I mean, creativity, intelligence, fire, passion. Passion.
All right.
In any form.
What turns you off?
Insincerity, untruthfulness, but insincerity, you know.
Yeah.
For God's sake, just say it like it is, you know.
If you could have written any song that's already been written, which one would it have been?
I Can't Make You Love Me.
What is your favorite chord? But then again, I was telling you chords, and you're like, I have no idea what he's talking about.
No, I know what chords are. I just didn't know what...
I know.
You know, don't put a flat or a sharp in there.
Yeah.
Probably A or G.
And it is true. Composers, writers of music do have their favorite
But
sound.
I like A minor, too, and E minor.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite. E minor and A minor are two favorite minors, although B minor is pretty good, too.
Yeah.
But G...
Oh, hi, May.
G and A, maybe.
What is your favorite rhyme? Is there something that you always go to?
No.
No?
I can't think.
But are there two that you really like to?
You mean like night and fight type of thing?
Is there one that you really, when you came across it and wrote it, you went, wow?
Well, there's a lot of those, but I don't know what I mean, because I wow myself all the time, and I don't mean that in an ego place.
Yeah.
At all. I mean, when I write a good line, I go, oh my God. Like the line, can I tell you a line that I wrote? It's not a rhyme.
Or what's your favorite line?
Of course, now I have to get it. It's in Oriental Silk on Dream 29. And it's
Which you're getting.
Got to find the right equation between. This isn't even the line. Got to find the right equation relative to time and fate.
There you go.
I like that line.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Astronomer.
Really?
Or archaeologist, something scientific.
Wow.
Quantum physics.
Wow. What sound or noise do you love?
The ocean.
Yeah. What sound or noise do you hate?
Alarms of any kind.
And last, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
You did a pretty good job.
Yeah. Okay, my favorite song is a song that I could listen to over and over again. If you can picture this, the person who has done their set with just a guitar in a bar someplace down underneath for an unappreciative audience. They're sitting on a stool up against the back brick wall, and their significant other has been in the, I'm just painting the picture.
I've done it many times.
This is not the song, but I can picture this song being sung. And their significant other is watching the set. And while the person has been playing 3 or 4 hours, someone has come and hit on the significant other. And the significant other has left with the person.
Oh my God.
So at the end of the night, this person, this musician, is left all alone in the bar and is just sitting there with their guitar at probably around 3 in the morning. And it is the most difficult thing to do, to write a song with just your own human voice and a guitar. If you've ever tried it, it is impossible. And Sid has championed it. And it is called Good
At Being God.
Yes.
If you had told me that, I would have brought a different guitar and played
That's
it for
okay. Look it up. It's called Good at Being Gone.
It's on my Howling Trains and Barking Dogs album, which I
It
have.
destroys me, absolutely destroys me. Oh, Damon, on the CD.
Saw you sitting in that restaurant, hand in hand with your new love. I realized what a fool I'd been to still believe in us. I had dreams that one day we would fall in love again.
Doesn't get any better than that. It's just Chopin said the hardest thing to master is simplicity. You mastered it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Damon. Okay. What would you like to sing for us?
All right, can I sing you guys a song? Oh, good, it's already in tune, pretty much. Can you hear me okay? This is a song from the Neverland album, but I consider it kind of somebody's phone.
Jeez.
Luckily, it happened at the end. Oh. But I consider it kind of a Jesse song. It was a bridge song that was somewhere between Heaven and Earth was my album, and it happened to be picked up by a record company. And they happened to ask me after that to write another album. And I thought, write another album? There is no other album. Anyway, I wrote this song. And it's in my show, and it's in the second to last song in my show. Better Than I've Ever Been is the last song in my show. And it's about my life. It's called Gravity and Grace. Gravity and grace, they're two close friends of mine, but it's hard to get them in the same room at the very same time. Gravity's so grumpy, he brings everybody down. My friend Grace, on the other hand, she's the sweetest girl in town. Gravity I battle with, and he always makes me cry. I can't seem to win a fight, no matter how I try. Grace looks through the window, waiting for a sign. When I've had enough of gravity, she will find her way inside. And I have my suspicions that I've harbored for a while. When they pass each other in my life, I swear I see them smile. Yes, I have my suspicions that they're not so far apart. Maybe they have some secret covenant, matters of the heart. Grace I don't see often, so I'm grateful for her time. She has a way of soothing me that makes me feel just fine. But a funny funny thing always happens. I forget her when she's gone, and I let gravity hang out with me, and he stays for way too long. And I have my suspicions that I've harbored for a while. When they pass each other in my life, I swear I see them smile. Yes, I have my suspicions that they're not so far apart. Maybe they have some secret covenant in matters of the heart. I think they have some secret covenant in matters of the heart.
That's fabulous.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. Okay, is it possible to bring up the house lights just a little? That's a little. Okay. Are there any questions that you have for Sid? If there are, just raise your hand.
Stunned into silence.
There. No, behind you.
Do you have a song arrive and you write it down, or do you sit down with an intention to write a song?
Very good question. It happens both and other ways. There are times when I get struck with an idea and I sit down and could come to me, and people ask me if music or lyrics come first. It happens all different ways for me. So there are times like, for example, I haven't written many songs in the past few years because I've been working so much in my show. So my intention once I get settled in Santa Fe is to, because I'm going to have my own studio there, which I'm really, really thrilled about. We're in this house, there's an existing studio. So I intend to start writing. And so when I start after not writing for a long time, I have to kind of go into it in that way of, okay, what's going to happen now, you know? And it's kind of like a writer or a painter with a blank slate. You don't know anything. When I'm in more of the flow about writing, something can come to me like that. But it's like a muscle, you know? It's like anything else. If you're not doing it for a while, you have to kind of get back in the rhythm of it. So, but it happens for me in different ways. And I'm not prolific like somebody like Bruce Springsteen. I'm not a prolific writer. I write, and on my albums, I try to make sure that there's, like Rodney Crowell said to me, you know, but even before that, I try to make sure there's no filler. That doesn't mean you might not like a song of mine. You might not like it just because you don't like it. But in my mind, I have to be proud to sit there and sing a song. And so I'm not that prolific, which sometimes gets to me, but I love it when I write a decent song. Yes, sir. You had your hand up and they...
No, he said no.
Oh,
no.
You said no, okay.
Any others?
Yes, sir.
So, in November 2015, my wife and I were living in California, and we just retired, and we were deciding that this is going to be our home, and so we were doing an East Coast vacation. We found a little place in Portland, and it was your place, and it was, I don't think there's anybody that I have not met that made such a personal connection to me.
You mean my Airbnb?
Yes, indeed.
I owned a duplex until just a few weeks ago. I'm still there, but
And it was really beautiful. The artwork,
yeah.
I still remember is there a story? Is there a connection to something that you've told us?
The artwork is, most of the artwork in the upstairs apartment where I am right now for another week is outsider art, except for the ships. That wasn't. But most of the artwork I collect, or did collect, outsider art from the South. When I lived in Nashville, or I lived there kind of, sort of, I was there so much, but I had a friend who was an art dealer down there. And in the early 90s, I guess, I got very interested in outsider art, which is basically art that is untaught. People who do art that don't have art degrees, and sometimes they're institutionalized, or they're prisoners, but nowadays it's a little more broad with just people who are not taught artists do art. But so most of that is, and most of those paintings are done by pretty famous outsider artists.
Is that right?
The Angel is Finster, and there's one in...
Really made an impression on us. The other thing I was curious about is that on your listing was this photograph that appears on tonight's flyer, and I'm just wondering, it's a great photograph.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, is there a story with that?
Well, that was taken by one of my best friends, Joanne Berman, who happened to be my road manager. Well, I've known her for 38 years. She's one of my dearest old friends. And she became my road manager in 1999 when Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth came out. And we were on the road together for about 10 years. She's wonderful. And to have a friend who you could share going around the world with, who also does the work, it was a unique relationship. You know, we shared a lot. And she's also a fantastic photographer, and God damn it, she doesn't do anything with it. I mean, her pictures are so good. But she took that picture of me a few years ago, and I thought she captured something in me, which, because, you know, most of the rock and roll pictures we do are not smiling. But, you know, I look really terrible when I'm not smiling, and the older I get, the more terrible I look. So, so anyway, that there's not much of a story behind that except that she took it. Joanne Berman, she's a fantastic photographer, lives in Hull, Massachusetts. Anybody else? And I'm glad you had a good experience at my Airbnb. I'm a super host.
Yeah, there you go.
Or I was, no more. We might do it in Santa Fe, so keep your eyes on my Facebook page.
Hi, dear. Do you have something to? Yeah.
After everything you've been through in probably the past 35 years or so, including Jesse's passing, if you were to just see her now, what's one thing you would tell her that you just learned through your whole life experience? What would be the best piece of advice you could give her?
That's a wonderful question, but I would have to turn it around, because Jesse's death has taught me more about living and life and value and depth and miracles and opportunity and survival, but not just the survival, thriving, than anything could have. Now, it's been 22 years since her death, and I really only feel like I've started to thrive since I met Tanya. And because she lifts me up. And I've always been my worst critic. So I would say to Jesse, and I love that you said that, I'm going to make me cry. I would say thank you. I will never understand why she died, why she had to die. I will never have gratitude for her death itself, but I have so much gratitude for my life in the aftermath. Her death gave me such profound opportunity to live in a different way, in a way that I could never, ever have done. I couldn't be the person that I am today if she hadn't died. And I could get, more intense about that or more serious about that. But that's a wonderful question, but I would have to turn it around and say thank you to her. There's no advice I could give her. Believe me, trust me. Thanks.
Yeah. Anyone else? Someone in the back? Yep, go, Kathleen.
Aaron had said at the beginning that there was a good story about you deciding to go with Elton John or Bob Dylan, and I was hoping to hear the story.
You're hoping to hear that story. Yeah, I mean, here I was, a backup singer who used to hang out and get coffee for people at Cherokee Studios and maybe sing a backup here or there. And I have a friend, his name is Bob Newirth, Bobby Newirth, who, if you look him up in Wikipedia, he discovered Janis Joplin. He was one of Bob Dylan's first friends who was kind of a promoter. Now, Bobby is a great singer-songwriter on his own, producer. He just produced Vince Bell's new record. If you don't know who Vince Bell is, he's a really good singer-songwriter. And he's also a fine artist. He's in his late 70s now, probably. Came to see my show in LA a few months ago, and I hadn't seen him in a long time. But Bob Crew, Elton John, and Bob Newirth were the three people who discovered me. All very different people. Bob Crew, the pop master, Elton John, rock and roll. Bob Newirth was Bob Dylan's best friend, And so Bobby invited me to come to New York City. I'll try to make this quick, which is, none of my stories are quick. But if you can hang in there. I was living in Los Angeles. Bob Newirth was living in Los Angeles. He was in New York City. In those days, you could send somebody a plane ticket. He sent me a plane ticket, said, come to New York. I'm doing this thing at what used to be the bitter end in New York that became the other end for a minute and a half and then is now the bitter end again. But it was the other end at that point in 1975. And told me to come in because he was going to be doing this thing with Bob Dylan, and we were just going to get up. I was going to be part of Bob Dylan's band, and I said, okay, I'm there. Now, so I fly into New York. I meet up with T-Bone Burnett, who if you don't know, he's a great producer, and T-Bone was a friend of mine. Stephen Souls, David Mann, these people I'm talking about, you can Wikipedia any of them. But so I went to the other end, and there was a bunch of musicians, all different kinds of musicians, Joan Baez, and everybody was just walking in and out of the other end for a week. And I'm on stage with Bob Dylan, just playing away. Like he wouldn't know me if he fell over me today. But I was there, and what came out of that was the Rolling Thunder Review. So I was asked to do the Rolling Thunder Review because I was part of the beginning of all that with all those other people. And okay, great, I'm going to be on the Rolling Thunder Review. I fly back to Los Angeles. I walk into Cherokee Studios where there's a press party for Neil Sedaka going on. And who's there but Elton John? Now, I'm in the control room. The party's going on out in the big studio. I said to my friends who owned Cherokee Studio, I'm going in. They said, you can't go in. I said, oh, yes, I can. I open the door. I head for the food. This is in my show. I head for the food. I try to mingle. Those lines are in my show. Now I'll get off. And, well, it's true. I mean, it's all true. And within a few minutes, Elton walks up to me, himself. Now I'm in got velvet jacket on and my bell bottoms and, my boots, and I got the hair. Yeah, I got the hair. That was Billie Jean King and Freddie Mercury, by the way, the other one.
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I don't think we even saw that.
Yeah, that's Freddie Mercury and Billie Jean King. And me. I was famous once. You know that movie Almost Famous? That was me. But anyway, so Elton walks up to me and he says, I don't believe we've met yet. I say, I'm Cidny Bullens. I don't remember anything else we said. Somebody takes him away. Nobody kicks me out. So a few minutes later, a young woman walks up to me, asks me what I do. I say, I'm a singer. And I say it like, you know, I'm a singer. And she walks away. A few minutes later, she comes back and says, what are you doing for the next 2 months? And I said, with my squinty eyes, I don't know. Why? She said, Elton wants to know if you want to go on the road with him. Now, this was a Wednesday night, September 17th, 1975. The next day, he comes with some limo, pulls up with a stack of albums this high for me to learn. The next day, Friday, I'm in rehearsal with him. But on that Thursday, I had to choose between going on the road with Bob Dylan in Rolling Thunder, having my own song to sing, as well as being in his band, or going on the road as a backup singer with Elton John. Now, in 1975, there was nobody bigger than Elton John. Bob Dylan he was trying to come back, and I'm a rock and roller. Even though today I'm an Americana artist and the Refugees are like folk rock or whatever you want to call it, so many things. You know, and I could sit here with a guitar and play, and I could back then. But I love to rock and roll. As you could see on that embarrassing video that I used, you know, I was, you know, a female Mick Jagger, they used to call me. And so I picked Elton. It was not an easy decision, but for me, it was more of what I wanted to do. And I did 3 tours with Elton. We became really good friends. And obviously my life would have taken it, my music would have taken a different turn. I have no idea what would have happened. My friend Bob Newworth was very upset with me for years that I picked Elton John over Bob Dylan. I have no regrets. Elton was a teacher. And boy, I just have to say this one more thing. My bubble got burst because I wanted to be famous at that time. You know, it's every young person's wants to be a rock and roll star. I wanted to be famous until I went out on the road with Elton and saw what a burden. Now, there's no excuses. I'm not saying it's not nice to have $19 billion and, you know, anything at your, you know, I'm not saying, oh, woe is Elton or Dylan or anybody else, but he's a very sensitive guy. And I saw him cry in the back of a limousine. I don't tell stories about Elton out of school, but this one I can tell. That's why we're still friends. I don't tell stories about him, private stories. But we were in the back of a limousine in London. I went with him to see Shirley MacLaine's show. And we couldn't even get into the theater because people were trampling over themselves to get to him. And we got shoved by his security back into the limo because I was his date at that point. We never had a relationship. It was all platonic, but he loved me and I love him and I still do and he still does. And he cried. You know, I've seen, it was tough back then. Now it's easier. He can walk down the street, nobody gives a shit, you know. But back then, it was hard. And, yeah, it was not an easy decision to make. And, but, you know, for somebody who was a nobody to have a true story that was like, am I going on the road with Dylan? Or am I going on the road with Elton?
Yeah, tough decision.
Jeez, what'll I do here?